Hello, and thank you for joining us today. We are Matrix Cross-Cultural Tours to Ghana in 2020. We are here today because we're going to be discussing with Dr. Shabazz, who serves as one of our advisors, the cultural reclamation for the dysphoria. There is now in our world the revelation that there is a regathering for those who have been dispersed to the four corners. And so today, will you welcome with me Dr. Shabazz?
Hi, thank you. Thank you. Hello.
Yes, so I'm going to take a moment and I'm just going to read your introduction because you are a phenomenal woman and we're so honored to have you with us today. So, Dr. Shabazz was born and raised in Indianapolis. She earned her college degree, a BS in psychology from IUPUI. Realizing her continued passion for education and a desire to work with students just like her, she earned an MS and a PhD in higher education through Indiana University. Her dissertation, Black Women, White Campus, Students Living Through Invisibility, explores the challenges and triumphs of African American women in college. That must have been a powerful dissertation. Currently, she serves at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. Dr. Shabazz created the Diversity Enrichment and Achievement Program that uses a holistic approach addressing personal, academic, and social barriers to achievement. This program's success has been heralded as one that holds students accountable while providing community for them to thrive in. Well, that is phenomenal. Thank you so much. So tell our audience, what led you to create the Diversity Enrichment Achievement Program?
Sure. So, really it was launched by my own experience going to IUPUI as a student, realizing that I was one of few students of color, saw very few students of color, saw very few staff and faculty of color during my undergraduate experience. And I realized as I began to work there afterward that I was seeing students experiencing the same thing. And so I was committed to working with students who looked like me. And I had been doing it sort of, like a lot of women do. We take on responsibilities and roles, just add them on. And I finally decided that it would be in the best interest to talk to the institution about the gaps that were existing for students of color, thriving on the college campus, not just surviving. And so as a result of that, I put together a plan and went to administration and said, you got it all wrong. The reason why these students aren't successful, the reason why they aren't staying is because you can't talk to a student about what they're doing academically if you can't help them navigate the personal and social experiences that they're having on the campus. It means something very huge when you go into a space and you're the only one. Mm-hmm. And if the campus was not embracing what that was doing to our students, we were doing them a disservice. And so it is my personal philosophy to graduate students who are whole and not ones who are broken by the institution. And so that was really the impetus behind creating DEEP.
Students who are not broken by the institution. That's powerful. So just give us an example or your own personal experience of something that it was like, really, this is enough. I've got to do something. What was that? What was that?
Oh, goodness. A multitude of experiences that really culminated into, me needing to do something. One example is I had a student come in my office who was dealing with domestic violence. And, people don't think about domestic violence as an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old student. And so me having to identify resources to connect that student with. I had another student, a male student, Black male, who was suffering from PTSD. And the way that he was acting out, he didn't even know that it was PTSD. But he found safety in my space, but for everyone else, they were fearful of him. Large Black man, stereotypical, aggressor. And it wasn't that, it just was he needed to understand, what he was dealing with, which led into mental health, issues that I was facing, women of color who were struggling with bulimia. We don't talk about bulimia in the Black community. And so all of these, various things that had absolutely nothing to do with academics.
Wow.
Nothing to do with a test, nothing to do with, showing up or studying or anything. It was, things that they were experiencing that had been triggered by a multitude of things on the outside in the college environment that were coming in that they needed to have addressed before they could adequately pursue their academic dreams.
Wow, that really speaks of that holistic approach that you're talking about. Well, you became, in 2014, you became the second director of the IUPUI Multicultural Center, spearheading the efforts to promote the value of diversity and broaden multicultural awareness. So you had to teach some things. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, goodness. So, you mean just in terms of...
Well, just in terms of as you being the one having to teach diversity and multiculturalism.
Oh, yeah. So, first of all, I had to learn some things. I think people think that just because you know a little bit about your identity that you can just teach everybody else about theirs. And that's not true. The beginning leg of my journey into being the director was really spent learning about cultures and identities that are different than my own, including the diaspora, right? So not all Black folks are the same. And not our, Black identified folks and African identified folks and, members of various communities. There was a lot of learning that I had to do. And so it's really an introspective journey that it started there first, and then as I was able to realize the issues that were interwoven in all of these different communities, whether you were differently abled or whether you were members of the LGBTQ plus community or whether you had different religious identities, I started realizing the value of people's humanness and fighting and looking for ways to encourage unity amongst all. And so that's really where the teaching started, is my kind of path to educating anybody about cultural competence or diversity or multiculturalism starts with self, then it moves to an understanding of others, then it's a realization of the issues that the society is facing, and then it's a call to action. And so that's really like my flow for educating others.
Wow, that is layered upon layered. And that is, we are beings with several layers. Wow, that is very good. So we are two individuals, Hattie Carlos, who is our producer of the show today, and myself, Evelyn Blunt. Hattie spent 16 years living as a missionary in West Africa, in Liberia, West Africa, and I befriended her when she began to take that inaugural trip, and that came out of my own desire to be connected with my ancestry and to really see the world in the context of how it related to me as a Black person, an African American person, so-called. And through her experience, vicariously living through her and even going to stay and visit and experiencing the culture, I realized there was a depth of us as a people that we have missed out on. And so coming forward to this time that we have here, we want to first of all thank you for being our advisor for our Matrix cross-cultural tours, because our desire is to take groups of people back over to Africa to see what it is culturally that we can really exchange and embrace. It is an exchanging. Not that we're going to teach anybody, but we're really going to learn, to have a reconnection. And so, again, that's why we thank you so much. With that being said, Pan-Africanism is a worldwide movement that aims to encourage and strengthen the bonds of solidarity between all indigenous and the diaspora and ethnic groups of sub-Saharan African descent. As a guest on our program today, we wanted to bring awareness to that subject, to that conversation. Now, I want to read this because I don't want to miss this, because this is something that's really relevant in our right now time. In the UN General Assembly proclaimed 2015 through 2024 as the International Decade for the People of African Descent, to be marked annually on March the 25th. Ghana, from whose shore the majority of 15 million Africans passed into slavery, has invited its descendants to the diaspora, in the diaspora, to return home. In 2019, this will mark the 400 years since the Middle Passage, and there are celebrations all throughout Ghana. The country has had a long history from the days of its president with Kwame Nkrumah, I hope I'm saying his name right, Nkrumah, of encouraging the return of persons of African descent to help with the continent's development. In 2000, the country passed a law on the rights of abode. That's powerful, which allows a person of African descent to apply and be granted the right to stay in Ghana indefinitely. Did you hear what I said? It has granted us the right. I've got chills because who would have thought we would have lived in our lifetime to have such a declaration and a revelation and an understanding made? You understand? So, is this something though that is talked about in your Africana studies?
Oh yes. So we, as a part of the study abroad that I oversee, co-oversee, that goes to Ghana, we leave Wednesday. We absolutely talk about Pan-Africanism. You know what it is. And really we have to even start before there because a lot of our students just have never explored their identity. You know, race is something that is not a Sunday conversation around many Black folks' tables. It's just, it is what it is, right? Or we talk about it from the context of the oppressive experiences that many of our people have or have had, and not from this space of power. And so, you know, one of the things that we absolutely do is to talk about what it will mean to be back on this land, and not just for yourself, but for your family members, and for your grandparents and your ancestors, and even getting them to have conversations about ancestors. That's another thing that
it's almost like taboo,
right?
You know, and none of our cultural norms encourage us even exploring or understanding the importance of those roots to ancestral heritage.
Okay. So even, you know, starting there, it's one of the things that, you know, we want to see this. We call it our Sankofa journey for a reason. And so, you know, a part of that is realizing that and then taking them through this experience so that they do have a greater appreciation for Pan-Africanism and seeing themselves and trying to figure out what it means to be in this space, what it means to give back to this land, what it means to take, you know, and learn from here, traditions and celebrations and cultural artifacts and ways of life, and bring that back into the spaces that and the people that they know in the U.S.
We're going to take a break because there's just so much that we could talk about, and there's so many points that I want to make sure we don't miss. But we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about your trip over and what your pursuit is and things that have come as a result of you having done this. Awesome. All right, we'll be right back, and we thank you for joining us. exactly. Thank you for joining us. My name is Evelyn Blunt. I am with Matrix Cross Cultural Tours Ghana 2020. We're excited because we're going to be taking teams of people over our first beginning June 7th through the 22nd, 2020 to Ghana, West Africa. And our desire is to have a cultural exchange where we're not going to teach, but we're going to learn, to sit at the feet of our ancestors and our brothers and sisters from our motherland. On today's program, we've been talking to Dr. Kalila Shabazz, PhD over at IUPUI, and she is serving as the Director of African Studies.
Of the
Multicultural Center in African Studies. So thank you again. So before the break, we were just talking about Ghana and the right of abode. And you, though, have been in your own stead for several years taking young people over to Ghana, West Africa. Tell us about that. How long have you been doing that?
So I've gone for 3 years, but this will be our second student cohort that we're taking.
Okay. And now I want to read this. It's estimated between 3,000 and 5,000 African Americans live in Accra, the Ghanaian capital. They are teachers in small towns in the West or entrepreneurs in the capital. So what we are witnessing in real time, and I have to say that like in real time, in our world, we're witnessing a migration back to our ancestral homeland. Now, you've been taking teams of what you call cohorts of students. So having taken those students over annually, what do you see as being the appealing thing, or you want them to see, to expect when they go to Ghana?
So, well, 2 things. One, just in terms of the, African Americans living there, the beautiful thing about our trip is we have an expat who, Dr. Michael Williams, who runs our program over there. He developed the Aya Center. So he was born and raised in the Midwest, and he went and took a visit over 20 some odd years ago and never came back, basically. So just to be able to interact with him and know his story, and he has absolutely no regrets. He loves being in the country, and so our connection to him is really what has made our trip what it is, because as he's been there over the last 20-25 years, he's been on his own journey of self-discovery through that country and neighboring countries. And so he knows the country very, very well, which allowed us to develop and build such a rich experience for our students. So we take 12 students, most of whom, both last year and this year, have never been out of the country.
Wow.
Several of whom have never been on an airplane.
Wow.
So lots of firsts. Never been away from their families for extended periods of time. They are all students of color, and they are just overwhelmed in anticipation of what they're going to experience. And we try to give them enough nuggets where they will stay excited, but not too much to overwhelm them. And so our trip is very, very strategically and intentionally planned when we go to the country, because we want to build, but then we also want to create experiences for that exchange and for them to be able to give back before we leave. So I don't know if you want me to detail
give us just a little bit. Just give us an overview.
Yeah, so we'll arrive in Accra, and we'll stay there for a few days and visit the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum, and then we go to, I'm sure W.E.B. Du Bois' home, and I actually had a student the other day saying, "No, like for real, we're going to where he was buried?" And I said, "Yes." And they're like, "Okay." So they're just like, it just really isn't connecting, but they know these names and the power of these folks. And so we'll stay in the city and go to the university, and then we begin purposefully on the 3rd day a journey up to Tamale. And so Tamale is a city in the northernmost part of Ghana, which is pretty known as one of the largest kind of slave depots where auctions were. And so neighboring countries would bring their slaves would be brought there. And just west of Tamale, there's a city called Salaga. And Salaga has a river that runs through it, and it was several slave baths and wells. And so these were wells that were dug by slaves and developed by slaves that are still active wells today. And so we go through the slave wells and see the market there. So the market is now a merchandising market, but it used to be a slave market. And so there's, those original buildings are there and everything. And then we go to a sort of like a museum that has artifacts that they have recovered over the last several hundred years from, that land. And so they include old rifles and Calabasas bows and shackles. And these are things that we physically can touch and hold and feel the weight of them.
I imagine that would have to be a very spiritual experience.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming for the students. And so we try to do a good job of checking in with them. So then we kind of make our way back down from Tamale. And next stop is Kumasi, and we make a couple stops in between. But we stop at Kumasi, and they're able to explore. We go to the palace, and
which is another big city in Ghana.
Huge city, second largest city in Ghana. So we do a variety of things there, and then we head down to the last part of it, but it's called the Slave River, and it's one of our last stops before we go to the slave castles, and it was considered the last bath. Mm-hmm. And so we take that journey barefoot from the path that they would have walked to that actual what is still the river there, and we usually do some libations and things of that sort. And then we go the next day to begin our journey through the slave castles. And so we do both Cape Coast and Elmina. And so we do them on different days. And we have conversations and lectures in between so that they're able to kind of really understand and process their experiences, which is typically overwhelming for all of them. So we do that, and then the last thing that we do before we leave and return to the United States is we go into a little village, and it's the same village we've gone into for the last couple of years. For one, because we want to, we built a relationship with the chief and the headmistress of the schools and things of that nature. And so we go and work with the children. And so our students have to conduct a lesson or, teach nursery rhymes or whatever. And then we're also, as a university, every time we go, we contribute financially to the building of a library. And so we get to see the progress every year.
Awesome. That is such a rich exchange. Mm-hmm. And I'm only imagining on so many levels. Now, when the students come back home, mm-hmm. that has to be, again, a reentry to their own culture. But what have you observed as some of the takeaways from students on those trips when they come back? How have you witnessed the impact upon those trips?
Transformative. Okay. Absolutely transformative. Students, I've had students say, I cried my whole last night because I didn't want to leave. Like, I felt home. It was one of the first times I've ever felt accepted and felt home.
Yes.
So yeah.
When I went to Liberia for the first time, again, mm-hmm. As we installed Sister Hattie on the field of our missionary journey, when my feet hit the soil, mm-hmm. like the black top of the airport, I had this whole experience, and there was this huge, overwhelming emotional sigh, mm-hmm. and I had no context for it. It was something so outside of me yet inside of me, mm-hmm. and it was like I knew mm-hmm. I was home. And before I had gotten to Liberia, West Africa, I had just come from Ukraine, Russia. And I had on my desk something about Kenya, so I thought I was going to go to Kenya. But I knew that divine guidance had taken me to Liberia. And now, because of the learning that I've had about Liberia, it really makes a whole lot of sense. But this is the missing piece, I think, to us as a people, which is why, again, it's our inspiration for the Matrix Cross-Cultural Tours, is that we must reconnect with our indigenous selves, our ancestral selves. So I'm sure that it has been transformative.
Yeah, definitely. And, they were able to share their journeys with their families. And so, parents have thanked us, and their grandparents are excited and proud because, for some people, that is a dream. Yes. It is a dream and something that they think is not probable in their lives. And, I've had so many people say, oh, I live so, vicariously through you and you all travel, every year. And I'm like, but it's possible. Right. Like, you can go too. You can go too. And so, I try to share as much of the journey because I know there are a lot of apprehensions to travel and global travel. We experience it with some of our students whose families tell them no, flat out, you can't go. I'm afraid for you to go out of the country.
That's unfortunate.
Or they have misguided or stereotypical assumptions of what the continent is about. Yes. And so, but our students come back and they're so excited they found purpose. And so now they're like, oh, I have reason to, finish this up. Oh, I have reason to make sure I go back to my community. I have, all of these things that I must do now because I don't have any excuse. I've been to the place, and one of the things we do when we're at the castle is I tell them, look across. Like when we're standing on top of, one of the castles and the ocean is across. I'm like, this is the journey. Across there is where you are. And you need to think about what it means to have traveled this far. And we talk about that. So part of the reason why we drive those 12 hours as opposed to trying to fly from the city to city is because we're driving it in an air-conditioned van. Most people, those enslaved individuals, some of whom may have been your ancestors, walked it. Yes. And they may not have made it. And so we make sure that, it's an impactful experience. And from what we've experienced, it absolutely has been.
Wow. Oh, it's so much. And again, it really lends itself to our desire. We're taking tours, and we are calling them emphasis tours, because we want to emphasize our first emphasis. This will be our first tour trip, but we're going to emphasize the cultural exchange and the opportunities in business, in education, early childhood education, because that is the next generation, and we need to cultivate them. And then in music, arts, and entertainment, because that is something that we can all gather around and have a unified, or what I want to say, universal identity towards. And so with those emphasis for exchange, I just believe that anyone that would lend themselves to this opportunity, going against the stereotypes, going against the preconceived notions, but being open to express to themselves and being open to receive that expression, that can only enrich the human experience.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the things that we learn about as a topic over there is, the idea of globalization and the economy. And so we talk about, the impact of, who has influenced Ghana, so like as we move through the country, you see different countries' emphasis and what it means to be so over-resourced, yet so impoverished because of other people coming in and, we'll give you these motor cars for access to your oil or, whatever else. But while we focus on that, we focus on how Ghanaians in particular thrive as entrepreneurs. And so rising early in the morning when we're on that, bus rolling through and people are setting up their businesses along the street and we take them through the market which if you've not been in a market like that, it's an overwhelming experience. But we talk to them about the nature of, their entrepreneurial spirits and their drive and what that means and how it's collective.
Yes, it's community.
There's like 50 different watermelon stands. How do you know which one to go to? But there's some community. It's a relationship building, and so we talk about all of those components as all parts of economic development for the community.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So. It's just rich. It's just rich. Well, you're going to be taking those students over, and as I said earlier in the broadcast, we're talking about how Pan-Africanism is coming into its own, and there's a greater awareness. And so there are going to be middle passage celebrations. Do you think you'll participate in any of those?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Absolutely.
All righty. Now,
usually when we're there's all types of celebrations going on.
Yeah.
So like constantly, and so absolutely, we look forward to trying to participate in some way.
Okay. Well, we're going to be coming to the end of the program.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to leave with our listening audience? Our viewing audience?
I would say do not be fearful of traveling abroad, and it's never too late. No matter how young or old or whatever your life experiences are, this is truly it will be a transformative experience. It's an individual experience. The journey can be created with an amazing program, but it really is an introspective time to explore self. And it's something that we don't get an opportunity to do very often, and so you have to commit to loving you and learning you. And when you do that, you will bring your whole village along with you. And so I encourage everyone, because once you're bitten, you'll be going back and back and back, and who knows, you might be like, I'm out too, from the U.S. But it's just an amazing opportunity to be able to go to the land. And, Africa is not what these televisions tell us it is.
No, not at all.
It is such an incredible place. The people are absolutely amazing. And we learn so much about them, and we learn so much about us.
In some circles, you would be called a light worker. You're a light worker, and so we thank you for sharing your light and spreading the light. We are so excited about your upcoming trip. We hope to have you back on the show, and you can tell us some of those things that you experienced, and maybe have a student to come and just share with us what that was all about for them. Dr. Shabazz, thank you again.
Thank you.
Many rich blessings to you. Safe journey to you and the team.
Thank you.
And we're just expecting to have great things to happen. All right.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to end up here. Just want to say thank you for joining us today on the show. We are Matrix Cross-Cultural Tours. We're going to Ghana in 2020. And so for more information, please visit us on our website and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. All the best.